When I tested Reverb2 by UJAM, I got a bit confused. The plugin looks like a reverb with all controls you want, but in this version 2 it is just as much a multi-effect preset box where reverb can be a big part of its sound, but it doesn't have to be. And the reason why this is because of one new function added in this version 2 of the UJAM UFX Reverb. It is this little dial here. With this one you can completely bypass the reverb of the plugin and only use the filter and finisher preset multi-effects. These effects vary wildly and transform the reverb into a wild and also useful multi-effect plugin. But let's wind back a bit and go over Reverb2 as a plugin as a whole. Starting with the biggest part of the plugin, the reverb section, which is obviously the main focus of this plugin. In this version 2, UJAM added 10 new reverb modes. And the plugin manages to give you the exact right amount of controls to fine-tune this reverb. What I really like is when you switch between the different reverb sounds, the controls you have set stay the same. Not every reverb plugin does this. When you go through these reverb sounds, you don't want to have time and size at 100% at all times. This will create a sort of unending soundscape which overpowers everything. With these two at 50% you will get a nice starting point. And that's what I will do now. Let's start with the sound of the reverb only. All other controls have been turned off and the reverb is 100% wet. I will use this next acoustic guitar because it's very broadband and will cover all frequency areas. Between all these reverbs, their characters differ a lot. Some will fit and some won't. But since you can keep the same setting between these reverb models, it won't be hard to find the best fitting reverb for the audio you're working on. There are a few ways to give you more reverb. You can play with time and size. but also changing the early reflections is an option. And this little toggle here does a lot. This enables a second reverb engine in the background according to UJAM. This makes the reverb louder for sure, but also denser. You adjust the mix balance of the entire plugin here below, and this big circle knob thingy in the middle is visuals only. I'd wish it had the function of what the mix slider does, because these are linked. Seems a bit like a missed opportunity. The reverb has ducking, a must-have these days it seems, and there are dampening, diffusion and modulation options. Now the reverb feeds into the filter and that all feeds into the finisher. These modulate and change the reverb quite a bit. Let's go over a few of those sounds during the sponsored segment of this video, but first please make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and hit that little like button. Are you a musician looking to get your music onto popular streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music? DistroKid makes it simple for artists to get your music out there. You'll keep 100% of the royalties you earn from your streams and get unlimited uploads. Use the link in the description of this video to get 7% off of your first year on DistroKid and find out why so many artists are using DistroKid. Before we dive in the filter and finisher, here are a few more presets. What is nice is that in this version 2 in comparison to version 1 you can now use the filters and finishers without the need of having the reverb on all the time. This is thanks to the already mentioned new FX input mix. This effectively, pun intended, turns Reverb 2 into a multi-effect preset box, and it hugely adds to the versatility of this plugin. But it also makes that Reverb 2 cannot be looked at as a pure reverb plugin anymore. The filter should be looked at as a sound changing effect. We're not only talking about low and high pass filters, but also about stuff like saturation, ring modulation, phasing and more. You have to flip through the presets to find the sound you like. There is nothing to tweak other than the amount. Fortunately, the naming of these sounds is pretty spot on. The filter then feeds into the finisher. The finishers can be best looked at as effect presets in the broadest sense based on time. There are a lot of delay based ones, but also things like gate and pitched bass effects and more. But then you can also find something like a phaser just as with the filters. Now, since the effects of filter and finisher overlap to a large extent, why not throw them all into one big pile and give users the option to choose whichever effect they want to use after each other. There's a lot going on under the hood of Reverb 2, but somehow UJAM managed to have this plugin to barely use any CPU and have little latency. that is 1.3 milliseconds at 48 kHz. I find this a refreshing reverb plugin. Better call it a reverb-based multi-effects plugin, I think. Check it out to see if it fits in your audio toolshed.